We often hear that knowledge will set us free, but ancient Indian philosophy offers a sharp warning. Accumulate enough of the wrong kind of knowledge, and you only build a more sophisticated cage. We find this warning in a massive ancient text, originally called the Mokṣopāya, the means to liberation. Today, it usually goes by a different name, the Yoga Vāsiṣṭha, due to centuries of shifting titles and editorial revisions. This text occupies a unique space in Indian literature. It takes a traditional Brahmanical narrative framework, a revered sage teaching a royal prince, and uses it to deliver radical Buddhist yogacara, or mind-only philosophy. One of its most striking stories centers on a prince named Kaca. As the son of Bṛhaspati, the preceptor of the gods, Kaca grew up surrounded by the highest divine teachings. He had access to every intellectual secret in the universe, yet he was suffocating under a profound, lingering restlessness. Kaca's despair illustrates a core premise of the text. Memorizing philosophical facts is entirely insufficient for achieving Jivan Mukti, liberation while living. The sheer accumulation of information cannot break the cycle of samsara. Other texts, like the Tripura Rahasya and the early Upanishads, echo this exact sentiment. They argue that second-hand knowledge is no better than the memory of a dream. Reading about the self does not trigger the direct, lived experience of it. Seeking a way out, Kaca approaches his father. He bypasses the intellectual theory and demands the actual secret to escaping the prison house of existence. Bṛhaspati gives a brief, absolute answer. Liberation from this prison house known as samsara is possible only by total renunciation, my son. Kaca hears total renunciation and assumes this means a massive physical sacrifice. He abandons his royal status and leaves society entirely. Mistaking a philosophical instruction for a demand to physically punish the body is the first, and perhaps most dangerous, trap for any seeker of truth. Kaca exiles himself to the wilderness for 8 grueling years. He subjects his body to severe physical austerities, living in deep isolation in the harsh, snow-capped mountains, trying to strip away every trace of his past identity. After 8 years of this deprivation, he briefly reunites with his father. He explains his sacrifices, expecting a sign of progress, but Bṛhaspati simply repeats his previous instruction: renounce everything. Driven to extremes, Kaca escalates his austerities. He discards his walking stick. He throws away his bark clothing. He spends 3 more years living in absolute naked destitution. But the breakthrough never comes. He faces the crushing reality that despite abandoning every material possession and every physical comfort, the heavy burden of his existence remains completely intact. External renunciation is a hollow exercise if the internal mechanism generating the illusion of suffering is left unexamined. Walking away from society solves nothing. Desperate, Kaca returns to his father one last time, pleading for clarity. Bṛhaspati finally explains his exact meaning. By total is meant only the mind. Renunciation of the mind is total renunciation. This initiates Kaca's practice of vichara, or self-inquiry. He shifts his focus inward, attempting to locate this thing called the mind, so he can finally destroy it. Here, the Mokṣopāya introduces its radical definition. The mind is not a physical object or a container of thoughts. It is simply the ego sense, the I, or ahamkara, and it is constructed entirely from overlapping, latent psychological impressions known as vasanas. The Ashtavakra Gita offers a similar warning against Kaca's instinct to forcibly suppress his thoughts. Trying to wrestle a false mind into submission is a massive waste of a seeker's energy. The text uses the metaphor of Kakataliya, the crow and the coconut, to explain this. A crow lands on a palm branch at the exact millisecond a ripe coconut snaps and falls. It looks like the crow caused the fall, but it's entirely coincidental. The ego's apparent control over reality is exactly the same, a coincidental illusion without any true causal power. You cannot fight an enemy that does not actually exist. The mind cannot be suppressed through brute force. It can only be dissolved through direct insight. Armed with sharp discrimination, viveka, and a genuine dispassion for outcomes, vairagya, Kaca finally stops fighting. He stops trying to wrestle his mind into silence and simply looks through its structure. He realizes that because the ego sense is unreal, there is nothing there to be grasped and nothing there to be renounced. He has always been pure, unconditioned consciousness. Kaushika emerges as a fully awakened Jivan Mukta. He takes up residence in a cave on Mount Meru, living peacefully and entirely free from the need to possess or reject anything. He composes a song of realization that captures the paradox of his long journey. He sings, "What shall I do? Where shall I go? What shall I try to hold? What shall I renounce? This entire universe is permeated by the one self." True liberation is not an escape to a different physical realm, nor a state of deprivation. It is a cognitive shift that renders the demands of the ego entirely meaningless. The Mokṣopāya's thesis, that freedom is a shift in consciousness rather than the accumulation of facts, became foundational to the development of Indian philosophy. The text exerted a profound influence across centuries. Advaita Vedanta thinkers adopted it as core authority, and it was held in deep reverence by the scholars of Kashmir Shaivism. The core lesson remains constant. Genuine wisdom can never be acquired secondhand. It must be directly tasted in the moment the illusion of the ego drops away. Kaca's journey is just one thread in the Mokṣopāya. The text is a massive tapestry of bizarre, mind-bending parables, featuring everything from philosophical vampires to queens wielding astral projection to teach their stubborn husbands. We'll explore those surreal narratives next time. Thanks for watching episode 20, The Lesser-Known Gems of the Mokṣopāya.